Schefter reported that Urban Meyer in the NFL could be a match. Of course, he's never coached at the NFL level. He's been great everywhere he's been, Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State, but a couple of different teams, according to Adam, have reached out. Urban Meyer expected to make a decision on what he feels next week.
This is Zubin Mehenti with ESPN Radio, and you're listening to The Morning Rush.
Got a great email out of the mothership earlier this week that Zubin was available for interviews. He's getting ready for the college football playoff and other bowl games, and really excited to welcome him in now to the program, part of Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin. Zubin, I want to start. We'll get to some college football talk coming up, but I want to start with your transition from television to radio. I remember you on SportsCenter. I thought you were an excellent anchor. You broke some pretty on-screen stories like LeBron going to the Lakers and stuff like that. What has your transition been from television to radio?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I think the biggest thing is I would say to people, I'm probably getting up right around the time I used to go to bed. When you're working on SportsCenter, especially late at night during the baseball season, you just never know when sometimes these 10:30 Eastern games are going to come to an end, and we don't leave until everything's over. Because as you know, even if it's just a regular season baseball game, that may not mean much in the grand scheme of things, unless you're a fan of one of those two teams. The longer a game goes, no matter what the record of the two teams are, the longer a game goes, the bigger a story it might end up being, just because you never know if it could end up in the history books with regards to length or anything like that. Wild things happen. So probably the biggest adjustment has been back in the old days when I used to work at night doing SportsCenter on all the highlights. You'd get home in the middle of the night, and now you're getting up in the middle of the night. So that's probably the biggest difference. But we've been doing it since August, so we're used to it.
So we heard you as the open that I made. You were talking with Trevor Maddich about Urban Meyer, his potential to coach in the NFL. I know that was an Adam Schefter report. Zubin, I want your perspective because we had a little conversation surrounding it this week. Do you think Urban Meyer would be a successful coach in the National Football League?
The story broke Sunday morning. I was actually back at my old job Sunday morning. I was doing SportsCenter on Sunday morning, and the story came across. And we actually had Trevor on, and then we had Trevor on the radio as well. The next day, he and I will be doing the playoff coverage starting at 3 Eastern Friday on ESPN Radio. And his opinion was, this is Trevor's, and you mentioned the clip you had just played there. He has really been successful at all levels, whether it's Bowling Green, whether it's Utah, whether it's been Florida, whether it's been Ohio State, whatever stage he's been on, he's always been able to win. And Trevor seems to believe that because of that intangible being the intangible of leadership, he'll be fine. People have said he's never really been on an NFL sideline. He's obviously a builder. He's obviously a winner. Some people will say that, the ability to win anywhere is a good sign. Some people will say in the NFL you can't out-recruit everybody, right? That was the big talk on Sunday morning when we had some of the early analysis. You can't just go get every 5-star, throw up a 50-50 ball and know that your receiver's probably going to come down with it versus somebody else. The first thing I thought of, we didn't really have a chance to get to this. I think he could certainly be a success. I think the right organization would have to give him a lot of control. But let's be honest, he worked here before he worked at Fox, where he's doing a great job. But if his health is a real consideration, and I'm not saying it is an incredible task to coach Florida or Ohio State, Utah, Bowling Green, particularly the latter two with the pressure and the expectations, it just ratchets up that much more in the National Football League. And I highly doubt Urban Meyer would take a job in the NFL where he wouldn't be given a great amount of control. I think at this particular point, you walk into the situation that you want. I don't think you really want to answer to a general manager or something like that. You want control. If you were to go to Jacksonville and get Trevor Lawrence, you want control of the whole ship, so to speak. And just with all the pressure and all the health concerns that he's had, the reason he walked away at Florida, the reason he walked away at Ohio State, although Ohio State was a little bit more complicated than that, as you know, wasn't just a health concern. Obviously, there was another issue there. I just sort of think about it and say, if this is a guy that truly is enjoying his life away from football, yet staying involved in the game and doing so at a lower stress level, watching his kids, his son play baseball at Cincinnati, being able to go out there and watch him play, all these sorts of things, you take an NFL job, and I'm not saying Florida and Ohio State isn't a tough job with pressure. You take any NFL job, and you're basically the general manager and the head coach, that's real stress, real high amount of pressure. And he basically said he walked away from football because of those reasons. So it'll be interesting to see what develops here, too.
Zubin Mehenti with us here on the Morning Rush. He'll be part of the coverage on ESPN Radio of the college football playoff. Again, you see Alabama and Clemson, the presumed best two teams of the four that are in the playoff. Do you think there's some fatigue with those two teams? If they win their games, they'll play again in the national championship game on January the 11th. Are college football fans that are not fans primarily of the Alabama or Clemson program getting fatigued with watching these two teams play potentially for another college football championship?
Yes, I think the ratings would be good for it. It'd be a standalone game on a Monday. Although the ratings this season, other than the NFL, have not been good for anything, so I'm not exactly sure. But I think if you clear out the schedule in most regards, and it is Alabama and Clemson, and they give us a great game, I think the rating will be there, and then some of the fatigue talk will die on a Tuesday morning when people start talking about it. But yes, in totality, I absolutely believe there's a huge amount of fatigue there. If it's a close game, the number will be there, and they'll be able to spin it the right way. I mean, look, only 5 million people watch the Big Ten championship game. I mean, that's wow. I mean, Notre Dame and Clemson was up. Every other conference championship game, even Alabama, Florida, was not at the level they thought it was going to be at, and that was a really competitive game. So yes, I do believe that's the case. Kirk Herbstreit came on our show. You might have heard this a few weeks ago, and he was pretty loud about it. He said the playoff system is broken. And I don't think a lot of people disagree with that. But when you've called every single major playoff game and every single championship game in the playoff era, and you say that from your perch at ESPN, people start to pay attention. He's talked about the Group of Five breaking away in the Power Five and all that sort of thing, all that stuff that's been discussed before, as you guys know. That's easier said than done. But I do believe there is something that has to be done. That's why there's so much BCS. Go back to the BCS talk. I think that's crazy. I think part of the reason that talk is out there is just because what you guys had just said there. This year, like the BCS, it feels like there's just two teams, and the job of the BCS was just to match the two teams. And this year, it sort of feels like it would be a stunner if it wasn't Alabama and Clemson in the championship game. So something's got to be done here. Obviously, the West Coast has to pick up, its pants. They got to pick up their side of it. They got to up the ante. They haven't been to playoffs since 2016. So the entire Western United States is a non-factor in the college football playoff. I mean, the Pac-12 can do all these little things like try to play games early. I mean, none of that stuff is interesting. I mean, it's all window dressing. When you haven't had a team from the Pac-12, and we know Boise can't make it, Boise State, because of everything we've seen with the Group of Five this year, or years past with UCF and Cincinnati and Coastal and all these things. So, when you have an entire region of the country that's not even a part of this thing anymore because they just don't have any juice. They have great tradition. USC and Washington has as great tradition as any schools across the country. I'm sure USC and really the Huskies, you have to be old enough to remember the Huskies, but I think USC and Washington would put up a great fight with regards to legacy, but they're just not there. It's like college football ends like after Oklahoma. Like if you're going from the map and you're going from right to left, it just ends at Oklahoma. And they need to do something about that to generate more interest in this thing. But as I said before, and you guys would appreciate this as two guys, I said this on the show last week. I said, listen, Alabama and Clemson are like Sidney Crawford, Naomi Campbell, and Janice Dickinson. They're real supermodels.
Yeah.
Everybody else is an IG model. They all look good. Like Texas A&M looks good, but they're brushed up and they're touched up, right? Well, we're the only one-loss SEC team out. Well, you didn't really play a full schedule. It's a little bit of a disparate notion. You're not really going against one-loss SEC teams. So like I said, Alabama and Clemson are running a race. They're not going to stop middle of the race. Everybody else has to run faster. So, you got some timeless beauties like those two, and you got a lot of really good-looking women with the other team. You got a lot of IG models, but at the end of the day, IG models are IG models. Supermodels are supermodels, and Alabama and Clemson are supermodels.
All right, so let's look at the two semifinal matchups to avoid that rematch of Alabama and Clemson. Who is the most likely of those two teams to pull the upset, Notre Dame or Ohio State, and what has to happen to see one of those two teams find their way to the championship game?
I mean, I'd love to see Notre Dame win, because if Notre Dame won, then it would just be the stunner that the college football playoff needs. I mean, predictability and all the stuff that Herbstreit and everybody else is talking about would be thrown out the window, because if Notre Dame were to win that game, that would be the single biggest upset in the history of the playoff. They entered as 17.5-point underdog, and it's actually progressively getting worse every time somebody puts money on Alabama. So Notre Dame winning would be best for the playoff, because it would just, buck the trend of, like, it's not just the too predictable NCAA chalk type bracket. I don't think it could happen. I certainly think anything could go down. I mean, look, if Mac Jones were to get hurt or something like that, I would never wish that upon anybody. But if something like that were to happen and they had to go to a Uyangalele and try to win with their backup, maybe things get interesting there. I just don't see how when they're matched 1-1 that Notre Dame is the better squad. I would tell you though that I'm disappointed in Brian Kelly's comments about we should be satisfied to be here and why are people so all over us. Getting to the playoff is a huge goal. I disagree. I mentioned Oklahoma before. If you talk to Lincoln Riley, look, when they take the field Friday, this will be the second appearance for Notre Dame in the playoffs. So they'll have multiple appearances under Coach Kelly. He's done a great job. He's been on our show a couple times. I really like him. But Lincoln Riley's also been to the college football playoff on multiple years. And you would never, tell me if you agree, I don't think you would ever hear Lincoln Riley tell his fan base, hey, you know what, we're here again. Everybody stop complaining. I know we got a bad defense. We can't do anything about it. We play in the Big 12. I've had some great quarterbacks, Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts. But, hey, what do you guys want? We're here. We're on the cusp every single year. There's no way Lincoln Riley would say that because the fan base expects more than that. They expect championship material. And so when Coach Kelly came out and said that the other day, I was really disappointed. I think Ohio State's got a really decent chance to knock off Clemson. Certainly a better chance than I think than the Irish. I think there's a lot of motivation there for Ohio State, whether it's all the things that Dabo has said or the fact that everybody has said that the competition between Fields and Lawrence at the next level is gone and Trevor's going to Jacksonville and he's way better and Zach Wilson might be picked ahead of Justin Fields, all this sort of stuff moving to the draft. So I think there's a collective chip on the shoulder for the Buckeyes, but there's also a personal chip if you're Justin Fields.
Zubin Mehenti, ESPN Radio, with us here on the Morning Rush. Zubin, Devontae Smith wins the AP College Football Player of the Year yesterday. Heisman Trophy presentation next Tuesday. Who do you think is going to win the Heisman Trophy?
I would love to see somebody like Devontae Smith win it because then it would not be just the best quarterback on the best team award. Obviously, wide receiver, what he plays, is a dependent position. But the way the award has been handed out in past years, as you guys well know, I just mentioned, 2 of the 3 winners there. Those 3 quarterbacks from Oklahoma were all Heisman finalists, all top 5 performers, with Baker and Kyler winning. But I would say, from what I've seen with those 2, Joe Burrow, go back to Manziel, whatever you want, it's basically been given to the best quarterbacks on the best team, or thereabouts. And so I would favor Mac Jones in that regard. And here's the thing about Mac Jones. Tell me if you agree with this. We were actually talking about this the other day. If I showed the average college football fan, now think about this. Mac Jones could be the best quarterback that Saban has had, or let's at least call it the quarterback of Saban's best ever team at Alabama. I mean, you can make some argument that they roll here to an undefeated title, and basically, let's say they're challenged one time, and that one time was by Florida. I know their defense hasn't been great earlier in the year, but they've really shut it down here lately. If I showed you, I'm just your first 10 callers, right? And you send them an image, and you texted them and said, "Here's a picture of Jalen Hurts. Here's a picture of Tua Tagovailoa. Here's a picture of Greg McElroy. Here's a picture of A.J. McCarron. And here's a picture of Mac Jones." I would be willing to bet, if you put them in order, the most recognizable, the least recognizable. I don't know who would be 1, 2, 3, or 4, but I think Mac Jones would be 5. And think about this. I mean, this is 2020. He is the starting quarterback at Alabama. But I guarantee you, I would think more people could recognize Tua, more people could recognize Jalen Hurts. Obviously, great story, inextricably linked, those 2 guys. More people might even be able to recognize Greg just the work he does on ESPN. I think of those 5, Mac Jones would fit. This is not an indictment, by the way, of Mac Jones. I'm just saying this is crazy that somebody could be this good for this sort of program and not be known by the casual fan. I think Mac would finish last in that competition. Would you agree?
I would agree. And you think about Tua and Jalen both playing the NFL right now, that still helps there. Greg McElroy appearing not only on ESPN Radio in the mornings, but then also just being on ESPN, SEC Network and stuff, and then AJ and Catherine still being in the limelight. Is he in Cincinnati? Right. Zubin, he's in Cincinnati, right? No, not in Cincinnati. Where's he at right now? Who's he a backup for?
I want to say he was in Buffalo, but he's out of there too, right?
Yeah, because Barkley's the backup there.
He was in Oakland, but he's out of there too because it's Mariota. Is it worth a quick Google? Can you do it for me?
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. So, hey, Zubin, before we let you go, man, and really, I know you're really busy, so we appreciate your time. You're a Rutgers alum. I have heard legendary stories about Are You Hungry, which, Tommy, I'll have to show you this place after. It has maybe the best combination of sandwiches I've ever seen. As a guy that went to school up there in New Jersey, tell us about Are You Hungry? Tell us, the listeners, if they're ever there, what they need to get.
Yeah, the interesting thing about a place like that, so I'm old, I'm 42, so I was out of there 20 years ago. I grew up in New Jersey, and this just goes to show you the sign of the time. Back years ago, they used to have a thing called a grease truck, and basically it was just a row of, trailers, and they would just make food in there, and they'd roll it up, they'd close it up every night, and, you'd get something called, like a classic dish would be a fat cat, right? So a fat cat would be like a big old hoagie bun with hamburger, cheese, lettuce, tomato. They throw mozzarella sticks in there, right? All that stuff in the burger or in the sub or hoagie itself. And they would just operate it out of a bunch of trucks until the middle of the night, every night. And then I think somebody at some point from the health commission, after decades and decades, would be like, does this seem like a good idea? I mean, you got a bunch of drunk college kids walking up to something called a grease truck, where they're just making a ton of food outside of the back of a truck. And after a while, it just didn't seem like a great idea. So they ended up shutting it down. But those sorts of places have sort of lived on inside restaurants as well. So it's kind of a little blast from the past with those sorts of places. Every college has that unique sort of thing. When I went down to Alabama to cover a game, they'd always tell us to go to Dreamland and stuff like that, or walk-ons at LSU, all that type of stuff. So everybody's got their unique little thing going on there, and that's sort of Rutgers' thing. And they're actually having an amazing season playing basketball. I interviewed Coach Musselman years ago when he was at Nevada because I love the way that he was building Nevada, and obviously I know he's doing a great job there. So I'm following them. Our basketball team is doing a tremendous job this season as well. Believe it or not, Rutgers, and I know you guys have great tradition with Coach Richardson and all that. Rutgers has not even been to the NCAA tournament since 1991.
Wow.
When you think about that. So hopefully we'll have it. Tell me the AJ answer. I'm interested.
It was Houston, and I could not believe it. I forgot that he was Deshaun Watson's backup. So, yeah. Zubin, we really appreciate your time this morning, obviously, with leading up to the college football playoff and the coverage you'll be doing alongside Trevor Manage. I know you're really busy, but we appreciate you making some time for us here on the Morning Rush.
Happy early New Year. Thanks, Stu.
Absolutely. So good stuff from Zubin Mehenti. You can always hear from him, Keyshawn Johnson, Jay Will, from 5 to 6 here on ESPN Arkansas, and hitthatline.com.